Calls for President Trump to enforce new harsh economic sanctions on Russia are getting louder in Congress after Russian drones were shot down overnight in Polish airspace. Brett Samuels, White House reporter here at The Hill, joins me to discuss. Hey, Brett, so what do we know about this Russian incursion and what's been the response so far from the White House?
Yeah, Drew, this is a pretty significant escalation of that conflict that has been playing out in Ukraine since 2022. Essentially what happened here is that Russian drones, were flying in Polish airspace as part of an attack on neighboring Ukraine. But this is a pretty significant, or triggered a pretty significant response from Poland. They invoked, NATO Article 4. NATO jets were scrambled to help shoot down some of these Russian drones in Polish airspace. This is the first time that NATO jets had been scrambled to shoot down, aircraft in Allied territory. So a pretty significant escalation and really kind of raising the tensions here and really forcing European leaders and American leaders to kind of figure out what the next steps are and how to respond to this.
You know, Trump has sort of tabled the idea of new sanctions on Russia that some in Congress have been pushing for. Republican Representative Joe Wilson from South Carolina called the drone attack an act of war. He wants sanctions that he says are harsh enough to bankrupt the Russian war machine. What would the framework for those sanctions be? And do you think it's likely that, considering this latest Russian incursion, there's a greater chance that those move forward?
Yeah, Drew, I think this is something that is only going to add to sort of the clamoring from lawmakers in Congress on both sides of the aisle to pass some kind of sanctions bill. We've heard in the Senate for weeks, really, this push among Lindsey Graham and some other folks in the Senate who want to see additional sanctions passed and signed into law by President Trump. Sanctions that would further punish the Russian economy, that would add potentially secondary sanctions on other countries that do business with Russia. But so far, President Trump has seemed a little reluctant about this. His initial response to this incursion into Poland was even, you could say a little nonchalant potentially. And he has sort of talked about, that he is sort of handling things his own way when it comes to Russia and pointing to tariffs he put on India for buying Russian oil. So I think we're all kind of waiting to see whether this is the straw that breaks the camel's back when it comes to Trump finally following through and sort of embracing the idea of additional sanctions on Russia.
Does the administration think that new sanctions on Russia could be effective? You know, the United States and Western allies have been talking about sanctions on Russia dating back to 2014 when there was the initial invasion into Ukraine, considering the BRICS alliance where you have Russia and India and China working together in an economic alliance. Does the administration think it can be effective by imposing any new sanctions?
Yeah, I think there is some skepticism from people in the administration that sanctions are really going to make a big difference at this point. Obviously, the Biden administration in particular imposed, a raft of sanctions repeatedly on top Russian officials, on Russian industries. It seems like at this point, the U.S. could impose additional sanctions, those secondary sanctions on other countries that do business with Russia. But there's an argument, from some who are skeptical that, it would take a long time for those sanctions to take effect. So it does seem like Trump at this point is maybe more focused on sort of his own one-on-one diplomacy over using sanctions as a tool here.
For a long time, NATO leaders, especially in Western Europe, have been warning that Ukraine is just the beginning of Russia's goals for the European continent. I wonder if there's a feeling that this is just the beginning of what could be further aggression and what NATO's response so far has been to that.
Yeah, this is, I think, to your point, one of the big concerns that we had from the start of this war, this idea that the argument was, that if Putin is successful in Ukraine, he won't stop there. He'll go to Poland, he'll go to the Baltics. And we're seeing with this incursion, I think, some of those fears being realized, folks, referring to it as a provocation. So, I think NATO leaders are going to gather here, U.S. leaders, European leaders. Trump is supposed to talk to the president of Poland on Wednesday in the aftermath of this incursion. So it will be very interesting to see just what steps NATO leaders, the U.S. and Europe take to kind of respond to this, whether it's to bolster troops in the region or kind of what the next move is here.
What are we hearing from the Russian side? Has the country made any statements as to what its drones were doing in Polish airspace?
Yeah, Russia has, as you would expect, kind of downplayed this, the significance of this. Obviously, this came as Russia was attacking Ukraine, so it did seem that perhaps this was kind of a secondary effect of that. But, obviously Russia kind of downplaying the idea that they are seriously trying to attack Poland or other countries here. But again, this is a clear provocation, a clear escalation, something that we had not seen to this point in the 3 years of Russia's war in Ukraine. So definitely a serious step and potential escalation here that's going to warrant some kind of response, I would expect, from the rest of Europe.
Lastly, just want to get you a quick answer here. Trump had been pushing for this bilateral meeting between Zelensky and Putin. Doesn't seem to be any progress on that front. Any prospects for this peace deal that Trump has said he was confident they could find?
Yeah, Drew, the chances of that meeting just seemingly looking slimmer and slimmer by the day. There's been no real follow-up, no real progress, no indication that there's anything on the books there. Maybe Trump will push for a trilateral meeting involving himself and Putin and Zelensky to kind of get the ball rolling there. But, time after time this comes up and Trump just kind of punts on it, says that he'll know in the next week or two what's going to happen. But, it seems that there are limited signs of progress here in actually getting something tangible done.
All right, I got to let you go. Brett Samuels, White House reporter here at The Hill. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.